The Bible doesn't give us her name or background, so this has sparked a ton of theories and debates. Is she a close relative, maybe a sister or a niece? Given that Adam and Eve are the first humans, it makes sense that their children would have to marry each other to continue the human race, but the Bible doesn't spell this out, leaving us to connect the dots. This part of the story really makes you think about how, even when people mess up, big time, like Cain, life doesn't just stop. The human story keeps moving forward. According to the book of Genesis in the Bible, Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve, married and had children. Cain's decision to marry and build a city shows that he's not just lying down and accepting his fate, he's actively trying to create something lasting, even in exile. So what do you think? Does this mention of Cain's wife raise more questions for you? Yes, today we're getting into a fascinating and often overlooked detail in the Bible, the story of Cain's wife. You might be wondering, where did she come from? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore in this video. However, before we explore the story of Cain's wife, we need to cover the events leading up to her mention. Let's start with the background that sets the stage for this intriguing detail. The story begins with Adam and Eve's first two sons, Cain, who became a farmer, and Abel, who was a shepherd, as stated in Genesis 4, verses 1 to 2, NIV. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. So Cain, the firstborn son of Adam and Eve, took up farming. He worked the soil to produce crops. His choice of profession is significant as it symbolizes humanity's dependence on the earth for sustenance. On the other hand, Abel, the younger brother, became a shepherd. He tended to flocks, and his role involved caring for and stewarding living creatures. This practice would later become central to many biblical figures. Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to God. The text suggests that Cain's offering was perhaps ordinary or not the best of his produce. Abel, on the other hand, offered the fat portions from the firstborn of his flock, indicating that he gave the best of what he had. God accepted Abel's offering but rejected Cain's. This rejection wasn't just about the offerings themselves, but also reflected the attitude of the giver. Abel's offering was given with faith and sincerity, while Cain's might have lacked the same devotion or wholeheartedness. This difference led Cain to become very angry and resentful. God saw Cain's anger and warned him that he was at a critical juncture. Sin, personified as a predator, was lurking at Cain's door, ready to pounce. God urged Cain to master his emotions and do what was right, implying that Cain had the power to overcome the temptation to sin. This incident is stated in Genesis 4, verses 6 to 7, NIV. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Despite the warning, Cain invited Abel out to the field, away from others. This indicates premeditation on Cain's part, as he planned to commit the murder in a secluded place. Cain's act of killing Abel is the first recorded murder in the Bible, marking the escalation of sin from disobedience, as seen in Adam and Eve, to violence and bloodshed. However, one version states that Cain was born with a twin sister named Aklimah, and Abel had a twin sister named Azurah. Adam intended for Cain to marry Abel's twin sister and vice versa, but Cain disagreed with this arrangement. To resolve the matter, Adam suggested making a sacrifice and seeking God's guidance. However, when God rejected Cain's sacrifice, indicating disapproval of his marriage to a Cleamer, Cain became jealous and ultimately killed Abel. God approached Cain with a question, "Where is your brother Abel?" This question was not because God didn't know, but served to give Cain a chance to confess and repent. Cain's response, "Am I my brother's keeper?" shows his attempt to evade responsibility. This phrase has since become emblematic of the idea of responsibility toward others. God then revealed that Abel's blood was crying out from the ground, symbolizing the cry for justice that cannot be silenced. As a result of Adam's sin, the land was cursed, and now his son Cain is also cursed. This marks the beginning of humanity's journey in a world marked by toil, hardship, and surrender to passions and curses. Genesis 4, verse 12. NIV highlights Cain's punishment. "When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." God cursed Cain by severing his relationship with the ground, which would no longer yield crops for him. This curse emphasized the severity of his crime, making his life as a farmer impossible. Cain was condemned to be a restless wanderer on the earth, signifying both physical and spiritual alienation. He would be without a home, constantly moving, with no place of belonging. Cain, realizing the gravity of his punishment, expressed fear that others would seek to kill him in revenge for Abel's murder. This incident is clearly stated in Genesis 4, verses 13 to 15, ESV. Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Cain expresses his anguish and acknowledges the severity of the punishment he is facing for his crime. He expresses his fear and laments being driven away from the land and presence of God, knowing that he will become a fugitive and wanderer on the earth. Cain also fears retaliation from others, worrying that he will be killed by anyone who finds him. However, God responds to Cain's concerns by offering him protection. He declares that anyone who kills Cain will face severe vengeance, being punished sevenfold. Additionally, God places a mark on Cain to identify him and prevent anyone from attacking him. After receiving his punishment from God, Cain departs from the presence of the Lord and settles in the land of Nod, which is east of Eden. The name Nod means wandering, reinforcing Cain's fate as a perpetual wanderer. Now here's where things get interesting. In Genesis 4, verse 17, out of nowhere, we get this line. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. This introduction raises immediate questions, as the narrative up to this point has only mentioned Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. However, the specific details about the identity of Cain's wife are not provided in the biblical text, leading to various interpretations and theories. Despite his curse, Cain finds a wife, and they have a son named Enoch. Cain further establishes civilization by building a city, which he names after his son, Enoch. This act of city building could be seen as Cain's attempt to create some stability and legacy despite his cursed existence. Given that women other than Eve were not mentioned before this point, the mystery intensifies. How could Cain leave his familiar territory and find a wife? To solve this mystery, we must consider some early incidents in Cain's life to understand the origin of Cain's wife. The Bible does not explicitly state where Cain found his wife, but several theories help explain this. The question of Cain's wife can be resolved within the context of the early biblical narrative by considering these 3 points. Number 1, Adam and Eve had many children who intermarried to fulfill the divine command to be fruitful and multiply. Number 2, Cain likely married one of his sisters or a close female relative, which was a necessity for the survival and expansion of early humanity. Initially, marriage within the family was necessary to populate the earth. Number 3, extra-biblical texts like the Book of Jubilees also support the idea that Cain married a sister, adding historical context to the biblical narrative. By piecing together these biblical and extra-biblical sources, we gain a clearer understanding of Cain's marital situation and the early expansion of the human family as depicted in the Bible. Now let's discuss these theories in detail. According to Genesis, after Cain killed his brother Abel, he was banished by God and wandered to the land of Nod, located east of Eden. A significant moment in the text occurs when in Genesis 4, it states, "Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch." This passage indicates that Cain found a wife after being banished for killing his brother Abel, but it does not specify where his wife came from, sparking much speculation. The most widely accepted theory among biblical scholars is that Cain's wife was one of his sisters or a close relative. According to Genesis chapter 5, verse 4, Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. The verse states, "After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters." Given the long lifespans described in Genesis, it is likely that Adam and Eve had many children who intermarried in the early generations of humanity. At this early stage of human history, marriage between siblings or close relatives was a necessity for the population to grow and was not prohibited. In the first generations after creation, genetic mutations and harmful genes, which make incest problematic today, were not a significant issue. The prohibition against incestuous relationships came much later with the Mosaic Law. During Cain's time, there were no such restrictions, so it was socially and morally acceptable for close relatives to marry. Some interpretations suggest the existence of other human groups outside Adam and Eve's direct lineage, potentially living in the land of Nod. This theory is less supported by traditional biblical interpretation, which emphasizes that all humans descended from Adam and Eve. Genesis chapter 3 verse 20 states, "Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living." This verse supports the view that all humans, including Cain's wife, were descendants of Adam and Eve, thus discounting the theory of other created human groups. Indeed, there are various versions and spellings of the name attributed to Cain's wife and Adam and Eve's first daughter in different sources. In some texts, she appears as Aklima, Aklimia, Aklimia, or Klimia. In the Cave of Treasures, she is referred to as Kelima. In various ancient Semitic Abrahamic traditions, the first daughter of Adam and Eve was named Awan. Awan in Phoenician Hebrew means potency or vice. She was said to be the wife and sister of Cain, another son of Adam and Eve. According to the Book of Jubilees, Awan bore children to Cain, and one of their children was named Enoch. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text not included in the Bible, provides additional details about Cain's wife. According to this text, Cain's wife was his sister Awan, who was a daughter of Adam and Eve. It explicitly describes how Cain took her as his wife, supporting the theory that Cain married a close relative. Additionally, the Book of Jubilees mentions another daughter named Azurah, who later married Seth, Cain's younger brother. The Book of Jubilees claims to have been authored by Moses, who received revelation from an angel on Mount Horeb. While we can't confirm Moses as the author due to the antiquity of the text, the Book of Jubilees holds significance in Israelite culture and mentions another book, the Book of Enoch, which was familiar to early Christians and even considered part of their biblical canon. This underscores the importance of not disregarding the Book of Jubilees as it aligns with biblical stories. Many people focus on Adam and Eve's well-known sons like Cain and Abel, but they actually had daughters too, as hinted in Genesis chapter 5, verses 4 to 5. The Bible tells us that Adam lived for 930 years, during which he had sons and daughters. While the daughters aren't named in the Bible, ancient Jewish texts like the Book of Jubilees offer some names. This untold story of Adam and Eve's daughters is often overlooked, but it offers intriguing insights into their family beyond the famous sons. Adam and Eve are said to be the first human couple created by God. In the Bible, they had several sons and daughters, although the names of their daughters are not specifically mentioned. The book of Genesis in the Old Testament only mentions the sons by name: Cain, Abel, and Seth. It's believed that Adam and Eve had other children as well, but details about them are not provided in the biblical text. While the Bible doesn't provide names or detailed information about the daughters of Adam and Eve, various religious texts and traditions outside of the Bible offer some interpretations and elaborations. However, it's important to note that these sources are not considered canonical by all religious traditions, and they may vary significantly in content and credibility. For examples, Jewish tradition contains midrashic literature, which includes stories, commentaries, and interpretations of biblical texts. Some midrashim mention the existence of daughters of Adam and Eve, but they don't provide specific names or detailed narratives. In Islamic tradition, there are various accounts and interpretations about the family of Adam and Eve, including the existence of daughters, though these details are not found in the Quran itself. Some hadiths and Islamic historical writings mention that Adam and Eve had multiple children, including daughters who were born as twins with their brothers. In one tradition, it is mentioned that Adam and Eve had twin daughters named Kalima and Lulua. According to this tradition, Cain, Kabul in Arabic, married his sister Lulua. This tradition serves to explain how Cain could have found a wife, considering he was among the first generation of humans. These stories, however, are considered part of Islamic folklore or interpretations and are not part of the core scriptural texts like the Quran. They are found in later writings and are used to fill in the gaps in the narrative of humanity's beginnings. On the other hand, some apocryphal texts, such as the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Adam and Eve, provide additional details about the lives of Adam and Eve and their descendants, including the names of their daughters. However, these texts vary widely in content and are not universally accepted as authoritative by all Christian denominations. Lastly, Jewish rabbinic literature, including the Talmud and other ancient Jewish texts, may contain discussions and interpretations related to the family of Adam and Eve. These sources may provide insights into the daughters of Adam and Eve according to Jewish tradition. Therefore, the origin of Cain's wife, as described in the Bible, has been a topic of much debate and speculation. However, some theologians suggest that the stories in Genesis should be seen more as symbolic or theological narratives rather than literal history. In this interpretation, the focus isn't on the specifics like who Cain's wife was, but rather on the moral and spiritual lessons that the stories convey. And that concludes today's episode. We sincerely appreciate your presence. If you enjoyed our content, please consider hitting the like button, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for your support.